Oh, welcome again in our meetings here in our reflections with the Course in Miracles and our willingness to allow the Holy Spirit to enter into our ideas about ourselves, those ideas who have not left their source, which is our mind. And of course, all presented ideas as we see them popping up in our mind are subject to bring it to a perspective in which we can experience a release, in which we can experience that power of the Holy Spirit's healing power, light power, love, joy, and see actually how that what he calls, and we will come in a moment to that. We are in the clarifications of terms, and in the context with forgiveness, the idea of the face of Christ is mentioned, but also the will of God. And this is how we see how the will of God is really working us, because right there we can see that power working on those concepts that pop up, that come up and represent the grievance, represent the separation in our mind, represent everything that is an evidence and a demonstration of reality of ego's thought system, of fear, of guilt, of projected crucifixion, punishment, all those parts. And you see, it's not by accident that we'll mention it, even it doesn't matter whenever you listen to this podcast, that I'm finding myself this weekend is Memorial Day weekend. And of course, there is special occasions to be at memoriam, to remember those who served the country. And it is basically also to be in remembrance of each and everyone who has been as in service of a country and went to war and has basically sacrificed themselves for ideas that have been presented and educated and polished up so that they could be believed and put in the mind as such a value that it is worth dying for. And so for this Memorial Day, we are more with those who remember and bring this remembrance of past experiences of pain, of it is the pain of the fear of loss and the memories of having lost somebody. And maybe it's not so by accident that we find ourselves, but that we can find already many times during and more during the year, like this shooting of children in that school in Texas. And of course, our hearts go out to join in something that is opened up for those who are left behind and feel that pain of loss. And we want to bring that to the holiness of our mind, to the Holy Spirit, and of course ask for the relief and liberation and being shown what the lesson in it is to learn. But what we are always shown in A Course in Miracles by Jesus is the lesson to no longer project the guilt outside ourselves, and to no longer let fear be the determining agency within ourselves, but really go for that healing in our mind. And how could we have situations if they are in context of a service in a war zone or in such terrific occurrence, terrifying occurrences, or horrific, I wanted to say, experiences that we make as human beings when we find ourselves in the transformation of our mind, or at least we see it somewhere in our mind. And there is always a lesson offered to us, and that lesson is about to not make any exceptions in the action of forgiveness, to not make any exception in the totality of liberating ourselves, and that means everyone, from the guilt in which we have held each other and we have projected upon each other and have condemned each other. And now, in this utilization of this wisdom within us, in that alignment with the Holy Spirit's mind, we do remember that we have actually this power and the capacity perfectly well to forgive everyone and every situation, no matter how it looks like. And it is a necessity, because otherwise we bind ourselves in time space, and we bind ourselves in the illusionary imaginations in which we basically see ourselves as victims, in which we believe that that there is something out there that is attacking us, that is trying to take our lives, so to speak, that is extinguishing our existence. And the lesson that again we are offered by our higher mind, by the mind of Jesus Christ, is to not really buy into that, but be very clear about that what is offered to us is a singular experience that determines that it is all myself, my own mind. And in that lesson that we just did in the workbook, in this review, which is the review of the lesson 134, let me perceive forgiveness as it is. And he expresses there in that one sentence, would you accuse yourself of doing this? Because that would justify the grievance or the projection of retaliation or of the blame and whatever projections are done in that expression of the pain that is felt and isn't dealt with. So it is very important that we answer this question, would I accuse myself of this? With, of course not. Of course I would not accuse myself of doing this. And so in that, really bringing that back to myself, it becomes impossible to accuse myself as you, as my brother, as anyone in my mind of being a wrongdoing. Did we make and commit errors? Of course. But errors are part of the experience in time space. Errors are part of the experience of coming here, being here, and undergoing such a light conversion that we become willing to let go completely and to see that it has to be a will that I call the will of God, a will of a higher power, that shows me that there is, as a result, nothing anymore in specifics of what we call personality, of character traits and whatever, um, we are troubled with or have difficulty with within our own expressions. But it becomes a real direction towards that this is an acceptance of the will, the one will that is only in reference to happiness. And that's why he expresses it. God's will for us is perfect happiness. And that acceptance of the will of God, and an acceptance that there is really something present within all of us that is and reflects perfect happiness, which means there's no failure involved, is if I accept what it stands for, because it does stand for that my way home at the source of being, or we call it home as going home, as being home, as being in that recognition of who we are, which is the reflection of heaven, or what heaven means. And all that I give for that, which will reveal itself, is I let go and turn over my own plans, my own little will, and my own little small ideas about what I think has happened or is happening or could happen, or who is responsible out there. It has to become a letting go of all this conceptual clutter that has been accumulated and made this conceptual mind, made up this conceptual mind that, of course, had no other experience than to be in separation. But there is a true alternative offered, and we do recognize that alternative, and that is where we were sharing it the last time, in that context of what forgiveness offers us, and seeing that this willingness to forgive reflects possibility of seeing some light in, if it is the enemy, if it is the perpetrator, or if it is the good friend. It's the same face of Christ. And this is what we are offered and asked to reconsider. So the invitation is a reconsideration of seeing something in the one walking next to us, in the one who is giving us a hard time, or is giving us a wonderful, happy, joyful experience on the perceptual level, and seeing that doesn't depend on any expression. That is seeing the face of Christ, literally seeing the creative thought in the mind of everyone, that includes ourselves. And so this is a practice, this is a reminder, this is an active remembering within myself in whatever situations are coming up. And that doesn't mean that I don't feel for a moment the pain of what happens in the illusion. That doesn't mean that I might react to something that I think is off the mark or needs alignment. But at the end of the day, or at the end of the road, we have to arrive at ourselves within our own mind, and take on that responsibility for accepting that this correction can only and has to occur within ourselves, meaning in my own mind. And only there it will show up, yes, that those multiplicity of images representing the problem were really just one reflection of one problem. And in that acceptance of what God's will for happiness for me offers me, I can actually realize that it has already been solved. This one problem has been solved. And so I can really bring everything that still is trying to challenge me, let's say, or tempt me to stay in separation. I can bring it to that light place in my mind, which is literally what the Holy Spirit is, and see how the conversion of that pain into pure holiness, into pure light, is occurring. And this is the invitation. This is the reason why we are here to learn. This is also the reason why in this insane fabrication of what's going on in the world, how we have invented that for ourselves in order to stay separate. We learning now that there is an immense, a huge lesson offered in that, because only you in your mind, only me in my own mind can accomplish that by this bringing it back to ourselves. And if we're going to look how we bring that together in that context with the use of terms, how Jesus here at the end of this course or in the sparkling edition at the beginning of the course talks about the face of Christ, talks about forgiveness, and makes a little sidetrack in an inclusion of teaching us when he uses the word God's will, and brings that actually, those three terms, into a greater understanding, a context of teaching. So I will just repeat these last paragraphs we shared the last time, where he said that the face of Christ has to be seen before the memory of God can return. It has to be seen. It is part of our transformative revelatory process that we before the memory of God can return, before the memory of the wholeness of who we are, where there is no confusion anymore in so-called perceptual reality and self-realization presents itself. But there's clarity about who I am, what I am. The reason is obvious, he says. Seeing the face of Christ is perception. No one can look on knowledge. So it introduces us here an insertion within the perceptual reality that allows us to experience literally a different world, seeing the world in a different way. Still in perception, because no one can look on knowledge. Knowledge is pure creative thought directly from God, right? But the face of Christ, he says, is the great symbol of forgiveness. And so it is salvation. It is the symbol of the real world. And so, of course, all forgiveness as salvation is the symbol of the real world. Whoever looks on this no longer sees the world. He is as near to heaven as possible outside the gate. Yet from this gate, it is no more than just a step aside. It is the final step, and this we leave to God. And then it is a symbol too, but as the symbol of his will alone, it cannot be divided. And this was then replaced or edited into forgiveness is a symbol. But of course, it is also this seeing the Christ's face in our joining, in our coming together, in our recognizing ourselves in each other. But as the symbol of his will, the symbol of God's will alone, it cannot be divided. See, that is a very important part, because at that point we come to understand that we are no longer dividing up our own will from God's will. We are no longer dividing up God's mind from our own mind. Yeah, it is really what we are here to experience, that in that practice, my mind holds only what I see with God, because that is the basis. Is okay, my mind cannot be separate from God's mind, and therefore my mind can also only hold what I accept, what I see, what I realize, what I think with God. And so the unity that it reflects becomes his will. The unity that also this recognition, this oneness, this singularity, and so the seeing of the light of Christ is becomes real for ourselves, becomes His will. It is the only thing still in the world in part, and yet the bridge to heaven. So whenever we talk about forgiveness, whenever we acknowledge the necessity of forgiveness, we are acknowledging that we have accepted something that links us to our wholeness, that bridge to heaven, that forgiveness is and offers us. God's will, and now he talks plainly about God's will. God's will is all there is. So we will not be successful to introduce or to try to interpret God's will in with something that we could justify ourselves and say, well, it is God's will that I do this, I do that, I participate here, I participate that, or I go out and just be completely crazy. No? Everything has been justified in the name of religion. Wars have been fought in the name of religion. We know all that very well. But we haven't understood that God's will is all there is. All there is. That is what God's will is. And we can but go from nothingness to everything, from hell to heaven. Is this a journey? He asked the question. No, not in truth, for truth goes nowhere. Truth is already everywhere, and so in everyone and in every situation. But illusions, he continues, shift from place to place, from time to time. And that's why they are called illusions and not truths. Truth does not shift. There is no shift going on, no change going on in truth. But in illusions, obviously only exist on the timeline, in time, and so they change from time to time, and so they shift from place to place. The final step is also but a shift. As a perception, it is partly unreal, and yet this part will vanish. What remains is peace eternal and the will of God. So everything is going to be part of this undoing process. Everything will be undone. Everything is subject to being looked at, to being given and turned over to the Holy Spirit, is part of the forgiveness process and the necessity within ourselves to forgive. But what is left and doesn't change and remains forever and forever the same is the peace of God, is the will of God, and that expression of the will of God that reflects literally our happiness, our being attuned, our being at peace, our quiet mind. There are no wishes now, for wishes change. Wishes, see, we all come from wishes. Finally, we came from the wish, I want to wake up from this dream. That was a wish, right? I want to know the truth. That was a wish. I want to know God. That's a wish. Or I want to see the face of Christ in the one walking with me. That's a wish. But in that allowance that the will of God already presents itself and is present within our mind, and we experience the peace of God, there are no wishes now. You have arrived. You know it is accomplished. Wishes change. Wishes are part of the illusion, even if they're important, because without those wishes for the alternative, we probably wouldn't be here. We wouldn't listen to the voice that speaks for God. We wouldn't accept a message called A Course in Miracles, or whatever message given from out of time to show that only the truth is true, only the real self is real, and nothing else is true or real. Continuing, even the wished for can become unwelcome. that must be so, because the ego cannot be at peace. And the ego will always find a reason to condemn, to judge, to unwelcome, to project. This part of the projection upon each other, the fear and guilt, that has to change. That is absolutely part of our learning here in time-space. But the will is constant as the gift of God. And what he gives is always like himself. This is the purpose of the face of Christ. It is the gift of God to save his Son. But look on this, and you have been forgiven. What an expression, isn't it? Look on that face of Christ. Look on that, how this gift of God, with all their characteristics, how you want to call them, as love, light, peace, joy, and so on. This is really your realization, your acknowledgement of being forgiven. You have been forgiven. And that is the example that Jesus Christ has given us throughout these last 2000 years. No? This is the demonstration of the resurrection. To demonstrate to you, to the entire world, you have been forgiven. And with you, everyone in truth. And that includes all the whatever condemned personalities that you were categorizing throughout all time. They also have been forgiven. They also are with you in heaven. There is no other reality. How lovely does the world become in just that single instant when you see the truth about yourself reflected there. And you see that it has to be a singular truth. And it is a single instant. It is this one present instant right now that opens up in our mind and shows us that we are willing to bless everyone and to love ourselves without exceptions. Now you are sinless, and behold your sinlessness. And only those who are ready to make that step and take that decision can really accept also what Jesus offers here, that now you are sinless and behold your sinlessness. But of course, if you are sinless and you behold your sinlessness, where would you behold your sinlessness? Except in all of yourself. And there cannot be an exception. If you are sinless, everyone is sinless. That's where we are, right? So in that sense, maybe it is considered this is a tough course in miracles. But it is really so simple. It's just about acceptance, to accept it or to let it wait for a moment and to accept it later. No? But at the end, there is no other way than to accept it. Thank you. Thank you for your acceptance now. Now you're holy and perceive it so. You see that context of forgiveness, seeing the face of Christ, accepting the will of God, offers us also to perceive that holiness now. Because that holiness not just envelops us, but we are that holiness. Holiness has created us. Holiness blesses us. Holiness is our blessing. And now the mind returns to its creator, the joining of the Father and the Son, the unity of unities that stands behind all joining, but still beyond them all. Wow. Now the mind returns to its creator, the joining of Father and Son, the unity of unities that stands behind all joining, but still beyond them all. God is not seen, but only understood. His Son is not attacked, but recognized. This is where we are then in alignment, when we also see that attack was just a bad idea, a bad dream, a real nightmare in our own mind. But there is a recognition that replaces that nightmare, and that recognition is the recognition of whole self, of who we all are, a perfect creation of God. Love created itself, and whatever you see going on, and maybe completely um, devastating you, because it is devastating what we see in this literally slaughterhouse, as what this world on the perceptual level presents. This is attack and defense, right? And not to go into the defense strategy and protect that little self of ourself, or of a projection of blame and guilt, but to see, now there's waiting for me the recognition of the Holy Son of God, of the wholeness of self, of the holiness in which we are perfectly created as one by our Creator, by one Creator. And this becomes now, enters into the reasonability of our mind. This is something we cannot really comprehend, nor explain, nor ever understand. But it is amazing how the mind has that capacity in the acceptance of my mind holds only what I think with God, of seeing, wow, yes, there is a way of thinking as God thinks. Right? And it isn't a thinking about something. The thinking about something, even about this now theme of the will of God, is just the approximation to be co-creator with Him. And then he goes into, and that is actually then the next section, the world you see is an illusion of a world, and that will be then the chapters which were named as true perception and knowledge. Right? So I will just go to chapter 7 and share with you for a moment. I might keep it a little shorter today because I'm already on the way out. And in chapter 7, in the 7th section and in the 10th paragraph, he speaks about the will of God, and that is what actually we are in truth. And he starts out in the end of the 9th paragraph by showing us, that is in the section the totality of the kingdom, and the chapter is called the gifts of the kingdom, showing us that projection always sees your wishes in others. Projection always sees our wishes in others. If you choose to separate yourself from God, that is what you will think others are doing to you. So you can apply that in those scenarios of war, of whatever devastation going on in the world. Because he said just before, whenever a brother attacks another, that is what he believes. So it starts with our own thoughts, with the belief system. It is considered then as a reality. Separation is reality. Separate yourself from God, he said. And then it is projected outwards and seen outwards as the evidence. But it is a seeing of our own thoughts in these others. And if you choose to separate yourself from God, or to stay in separation from God, that is what you will think others are doing to you. That others will take away that little life, or others will punish you, or have the right to punish you, or others have the power to exterminate you, to take your life. You are the will of God, he says. Do not accept anything else as your will. or you are denying what you are. You see, there's nothing in between. It is either acceptance or denial. And this choice we actually take every moment. I choose not to deny who I am. I choose to accept God's will and accept that this is my will and I have no other will. Deny this, deny God's will, you could say, and you will attack believing you have been attacked. And that is a vicious circle. Attack, counterattack, defense, counter defense. This is really what the war zone within the ego mind, within the projected, that type of world is seen and experienced. If you deny this acceptance of the will of God, you will attack believing you have been attacked, but see the love of God in you, that the will of God will bring forth. See the love of God, and you will see it everywhere because it is everywhere. And this is why we are offered also these terrifying, these horrific images within the world, that we really change our mind and do not value what is valueless, that we do not place any perspective on those separation ideas, and kind of keeping them alive in the mind, but really letting them go, really take a firm decision, not this anymore. I have enough, literally, from that war against myself. I'm willing to accept that only love created me like itself. I'm willing to accept only God's will for me, which is perfect happiness. And so that is a guarantee that this Course in Miracles gives us, that you will see, he says, you will see it everywhere. And that means in everyone. They are part of you. Okay, first, see his abundance in everyone, and you will know that you are in him with them. So everyone is then with us in him. It is the one mind in God. They are part of you as you are part of God. You are as lonely without understanding this as God himself is lonely when his sons do not know him, when his sons continue to project fear, guilt, separation, when his sons still pretend and take revenge, or think that in blame and projection and condemnation there would be a solution. There is no solution here by any of these. Basically, those are the salvation ideas of the ego. The peace of God is understanding this. There is only one way out of the world thinking, just as there was only one way into it. Understand totally by understanding totally. So this one way is prescribed in the mind training of A Course in Miracles. This one way is the acceptance of the correction for ourselves, the acceptance of the atonement for ourselves. This one way is the acknowledgement there is only one will, and it is the will of God. There is only love without opposite. There is not in reality such a thing like hate or hate crimes. It is really just part of the dream sequence. That's why we all, this is an offer to wake up. Perceive any part of the ego thought system, any part, as wholly insane, wholly delusional, and wholly undesirable. And this is where we are training ourselves towards. And you have correctly evaluated all of it. You're seeing clearly. Then you know yourself and you know everyone. And this is the end of the world of separation then. This correction enables you to perceive any part of creation as wholly real, wholly perfect, and wholly desirable. And wanting this only, you will have this only. And giving this only, you will be only this. The gifts you offer to the ego are always experienced as sacrifices, but the gifts you offer to the kingdom are gifts to you. They will always be treasured by God because they belong to His beloved sons who belong to Him. All power and glory are yours because the kingdom is His. So you see, we are given everything in order to allow our mind to be aligned with His mind and to no longer have the necessity to determine ourselves as being separate, as knowing something differently, separately, better, or in any way, but to really see the all what it is about is my mind holds only what I think with God, and to accept only what God's will is for us. God did not will a devastating world. God did not will the whatever horrific scenario going on at whatever time. Those are just repetitions of expressions and belief systems in which the ego thrives and determines the separation from our source. So we are turning only towards the truth and let only the truth be true and nothing else. And with this, I just express my utmost gratitude for you being here, for you being willing to go along in this offer of Jesus Christ with a full change of mind, with undergoing a complete change of mind and allowing, therefore, to see what never has separated itself from our source, seeing that Christ light in ourselves and in all the world. And that is the reflection of the face of Christ that literally gives us evidence that there is only one will, and that is God's will. There is no will but God's, says another lesson. Blessings, brother, blessings. We are joined in that realization. We are joining in His light. We are joining in letting go everything that we believed and made us unhappy and suffer and be in pain. We're letting it all go. We're giving it all to the Holy Spirit. We are asking for the healing of it. Bye bye. Thank you.